Now we have the carburetors out, it's a good opportunity to check the valve clearances, and we've got 4 valve covers that we can remove and then check the clearances and adjust if necessary. So this is the front cylinder, that's one of the valve covers. The other one is underneath at the front, so you'll just be able to see it there, a little bit more difficult to get to. On the rear cylinder we've got one that's under this heat shield, and the most difficult one to access is the one round the back here. That's going to be quite tight, but before removing the covers there's some preparation work that we need to do. So it would help if we could remove the spark plugs from the 2 cylinders, and that will allow us to turn the engine more freely, and we need to set up the timing marks within the engine. So some of the things that we'll need to do is, firstly, we're going to remove these inspection covers here, these 2, so we can see the timing marks. We're going to need to remove the top cylinder covers again so we can see the timing marks. As I say, we're going to remove the spark plugs to allow the engine to turn easily without kind of pushing against the compression in the engine. And then we'll also remove some of these chrome covers here on the top of the cylinders, so that we've got a little bit more access room to get into the actual valves themselves. So that's what we're going to do with the next stage of the process, and we're going to start by taking those 2 inspection screws out on the left hand side of the engine casing. So we're going to start with the larger 2 of the inspection covers. Now the metal used to produce these is very soft, and it's a large cutout here. If you use a normal flathead screwdriver, you'll find that you'll damage the actual cover. So if you take a coin, it fits into the actual slot far better. And avoids you damaging the soft metal cover, as I've done in the past. The second one is a thinner slot, so you do have to use quite a large flathead screwdriver. Again, just be careful that you don't damage it. They shouldn't be put on too tight, should be a snug fit but not tight. But you can see where I've kind of damaged it in the past. So those are the 2 covers off to allow us, firstly in this one we're going to use a 22mm socket to actually turn the engine, and through this inspection window here we're going to look for the timing mark T to align that with the timing mark at the top of the cylinder here, to make sure that we've got it at the top end of the revolution, so that the piston is at the highest point. We're just now removing this rear chrome cover on the back cylinder to uncover the spark plug. And we'll just take the screw cap off the spark plug. Right. Spark plug socket. The first one out. Have a quick look at the spark plug. Nice colour, no problems with that one. Onto the left hand side of the bike now, front cylinder. Removing this chrome cover. No Allen key screws in that one, it's just a hard pull that needs to be applied to pull it off the grommets here. One on the other side as well. And then we need to remove the spark plug cap. Yamaha don't make it easy to access these spark plugs. And then using this type of flexible spark plug socket, should be able to get that spark plug out. That's the second spark plug out. Would have been easier to get out if I'd have taken the crash bar off first, but I wanted to try and avoid that if possible. But certainly without this type of spark plug socket wrench, it would have been very difficult to get that plug out, if not impossible with the normal socket wrenches that you get. Second spark plug also looks like it's been burning well in the cylinder. Nice colour, nice and dry, not oily. Still on the left hand side of the bike here, I'm just going to remove this rear cylinder chrome cover, held on by these two Allen key bolts. This will just give us better find that one later in the engine. This will just give us a little bit more room to work on that rear valve. Having lost the Allen key bolt screw down through the engine, just had to remove this rear left hand side chrome cover to try and find it. And there it is. So I can put that back where it needs to be in its housing, ready for the rebuild. Next I'm removing the top part of the cylinder casing, so that we can see the upper timing mark. I've already removed the first bolt, this is the second one. There we are. And although it's a bit dark on that top cog there will be a timing mark that needs to be at the very top, and it's going to be opposite that point there that's moulded into the casing. So we'll get some light on that in a minute so we can see it more clearly. On the other side now, on the right hand side of the bike, again taking the top part of the cylinder casing off. Again, this is the second screw, first screw already been taken out, first bolt. Just need to remove this air hose from the top. Well, I'm going to have to remove that chrome top cover as well. Taken now the two bolts out of that top chrome cover, that will come off, and that will release now the top casing of the cylinder head. We've got a better view on this side of the timing point on the wheel there, and when we're setting the valve clearance we're going to need to line it up with that point in the cylinder casing. That will tell us that the piston is in the highest position, which is appropriate for setting the valve clearances. So we're going to set the timing marks up now, and we've got the 22mm socket on the end of the wrench extension. That's going to go through the larger of the two inspection holes, and if we just have a look through there, so there you can see the 22mm bolt that you can see through the large inspection window, and we need to put the 22mm socket on that with the extended arm to turn the engine so that we can line up the timing marks. And then in the smaller inspection window you can see there the mark with the letter T at the side on the right hand side, and that needs to line up with a notch that's in the casing at the top, 12 o'clock on the clock face, and that lines up then with the timing mark on the rear cylinder. On the sprocket at the top of the cylinder needs to line up with the appropriate mark, and then likewise that dot there lined up with that timing mark on the casing at the top of the cylinder. So that should mean now that it's at the top of its stroke and ready for the rear cylinder to have its valve clearances checked. So this is the valve cover on the rear cylinder at the top. So we've just taken the two Allen key bolts out and then carefully removing the valve cover. There's an O seal that you just need to inspect and make sure it looks clean and it's not rotted, deteriorated anywhere, which it hasn't. Looks nice and clean. And now we can see we've got clear access to check the valve clearance. We've got a 12mm nut there at the top, which may need to be loosened if it does need adjusting, with an Allen key recess at the top there, which we can turn clockwise, anti-clockwise to either increase or decrease the valve clearance. So I'm firstly going to try with 0.08, so hopefully that should go in. So you can, a little bit slack, but you can feel it touching either side of the valve. But I'm now going to try that 0.1. And 0.1 won't go through, so that must be about 0.9. So I'm happy with that, directly more or less in the centre between 0.07mm and 0.12. So I'm not going to adjust that one, I'm going to leave it as it is. So on the rear one there, which is lower, slightly lower down on the cylinder, with it being tilted back, I am expecting a little bit of oil to seep out of this one, so I'll put a rag to catch any drips of oil that come out when releasing the cover. Check the O-ring to make sure there's no damage. Again, that looks fine. So we're going to check the valve clearance on this one. I'm hoping that it's going to be within range, because this is far more difficult to adjust, getting the spanner in and the Allen key, but hopefully it'll be in range. Same process as the first one. Come over onto the right hand side of the bike just to get a slightly better view of the valve, and the clearance on this one should be between 0.12mm and 0.17mm. So hopefully it'll be somewhere in the middle of that range. Now the most difficult tappet to get access to was the one that's been out so far. It was actually set to 0.06 millimeters, which is even smaller than the intake valve setting. Minimum on that is 0.07 to 0.12. So this was very, very tight. So what you do is we've released that locking nut by turning it anti-clockwise, and then with an Allen key we've rotated the tappet anti-clockwise to make the gap bigger, and now set it to 0.15. Tolerance has been between 0.12 and 0.17, and if I just grab that tappet and if you have a listen, you can hear it moving freely and tapping as it should do. So that's set to the correct distance now. What's important is that when you do set the valve clearances, you must do it with the engine cold. So I think most people would. I don't see how you could strip down the bike to this stage really and not have the engine cold. But those clearances when the engine is warm change, and the settings have been set on the basis of the engine cold. So if you were to do these settings with the engine warm, it would totally have the wrong effect. So I'm just going to put the covers back on now. I'm going to give them a quick clean. Seals look okay, but you don't want to be leaving these covers off longer than what's necessary. So I'm going to put the rear cylinder valve covers back on. Having put the valve covers back on, I'm going to put the cylinder head cover back on now. Rear left hand side chrome cover, top of the cylinder back on. So we're now going to set up the timing marks for the front cylinder, and I'm turning the engine round to the timing mark, which is just a singular notch, sometimes referred to as the eye notch, on the rotor wheel inside this smaller inspection cover. So there's the eye mark through the inspection window, lining up with a little notch in the outer casing, and on the other side, on the sprocket on the cylinder, the dot will either be at the bottom or the top. If it's at the bottom, you have to do another 360-degree turn to get it to be at the top of the sprocket, lined up with the notch in the casing. So let's go around the other side and check where it is. So there's the timing mark at the top there, lined up with the notch in the outer casing. So we've got the valves, tappets in the right position to check the adjustments now. So we're going to take the intake cover off first. And on this screw, just note that there is the soft metal clip for the electric cables that's fastened in there as well, which we'll need to replace when we do the rebuild to secure the electrical cables. So that's the soft metal clip I was referring to on the bottom left Allen bolt. So just make sure that that goes back on as part of the rebuild. So I'm just going to see if there's some movement in that tappet. You should be able to grab hold of it and move it up and down and then hear it clicking. Which you can. So we'll check the clearances on that one now. So this is the 0.08mm feeler gauge, and you can just feel it touching each side of the tappet. But then when I try the 0.1, this is the 0.1, it's not going through. So I would say that's about 0.09mm, which is spot on, more or less in the middle of the range between 0.07 and 0.12. So no need to adjust that one, leave as is. Just going to clean all the surfaces before replacing the casing. So just finishing off replacing the valve cover, the intake valve on the front cylinder, making sure that this electrical clip is replaced with the bolt. And that's it. So now removing the front cover, I'll give it a little bit of a tap with something soft just to break the seal. That's the cover. A little bit more oil in this one, and we've put a cloth onto the floor underneath just to catch any drips of oil that tends to come out of the outtake valve. Now you can just see it. So we're just going to grab hold of the tappet. And we can hear a clicking noise there, which is good. But we'll just check the clearance on that. So next we're going to clean those surfaces and replace the valve cover. Replacing now the top cylinder cover. Just finishing replacing the top chrome cover, right hand side front cylinder. Just putting the air breather pipe back on. Both spark plugs going back in. Be very careful you don't cross thread. Don't over tighten, just nice and snug. Spark plug caps going back on. Making sure they're fully seated. Chrome covers back on. Firmly pushed into the grommets. Just tightening up the front spark plug. Spark plug cap fully on and seated. Chrome cover back in place. Left panel back on and right panel back on. Just need to put the inspection plate screws back in. Larger one tightened up with a coin and a flathead screwdriver for the other one. No need to over tighten, just nice and snug. That's completed that particular task, and it's now ready for the carburetor to go back in, which if you want to see, you can look at one of my other videos.